I have no idea what is happening today. This is definitely live code fail stream. I don't even know if we're live yet. So if you think we're live, if we're live, let me know, because I have no idea. It's one of those days today. You know, you try to do something and it just doesn't work for you. I think I'm live. Oh, I made it. Sharon says, glad I made it. Well, Sharon, I'm glad to be here too. Paul says, no worries. Hey, glad you made it. Yeah, so I guess I did make it. This is going to be, like I keep saying, you know, every stream I do is unprofessional, but this stream definitely takes the cake for super duper unprofessional. Let me know if my audio's not too loud, it's working, or something's not working. I have no idea what happened. Like my audio just cut out, so let me know if you guys could hear me. Because I can't hear myself. But if you could hear me, I don't need to hear myself. Like that's perfectly fine. So let me know if the audio is working, if things are working. Because at this point right now, I have no idea why, what happened, because stuff is just not working. But if you guys could hear me though, I don't have to hear myself. That's perfectly fine. So my volume is not loud enough. I'm going to try to make myself louder. So let's fix the audio stuff. So you guys let me know. How's it working? My music is louder than I am. Okay, I'm going to fix it. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to get it done. I can't even hear anything right now. Yeah, I have no idea what I did. I think I broke something on my stream. It's okay. Anyway, if this is good, we're just gonna work here. And I'm not gonna worry about the music. Not gonna worry about all that other stuff. Let me put a tweet out that we're live. I think get more people involved. Music is gone. That's fine. We don't need music today. You know, we're just gonna hang out. I'm just gonna send a tweet out quickly, so if more people wanna jump in. And if you don't hear my music, that's fine. I'm not gonna worry about it. Something weird is happening with my computer, and I'll have to figure out later. And so, you know what? We'll just go without the music today, and figure it out later. Because the most important part is that we're going through coding, answering questions, doing all this other great stuff, and my free time will have to figure out what happened. But for now, it's fine. I don't even need headphones anymore because I can't hear anything either. So that's fine. So anyway, let me quickly share this tweet. You know, and then we'll get to it. I know it's so funny. Like sometimes you wish you like, oh, today's gonna be fine. There's not gonna be any issues, and then issues all the time. Something happens, but life is life. I hope you guys are doing good though. I hope you guys are doing good. I hope my audio is okay. Today we're gonna just continue working on a project, and the topic of today we're going to create a custom controller for our code in Strapi. And again, if you are not familiar with Strapi, if you're not familiar with certain things that I'm doing, it's perfectly fine, because the point is getting the big picture, getting the big concepts, and just kind of hanging out together. So that's what we're going to work on today. So because I had to shut my computer down, let me just reopen my development environment. And while I do that, I'm also going to showcase kind of what we're doing. But while I'm kind of setting everything up, you guys could say hello in the chat. Hope everybody's doing great. Let me know how's everybody's week going. Hope it's going fantastic. You know, super important. Make sure you guys having a good time. And yeah, today's my day is like super crazy. You know, like sometimes you have good, like, I mean, it wasn't a bad day, but it's just like everything is breaking. Like, and then I'm always like a few minutes late on everything I'm doing. But, you know, we're going to fix it. We're going to resolve it. We're going to make it work. And we're going to get for it. So I'm opening like my code. We have two different things that we're working on. We have our front end, we have our back end, and today we're going to work on, I'll show you what we're going to work on. But first I have to open my code editor. Hey, what's up, Alejandro? What's going on? I guess I could say hello to everybody. We have Alejandro, Pavel, Sharon. Yeah, let me know if the volume is still good, because I'm just breaking stuff left and right here. But we're going to get to it in a second. Well, let me kind of find my gears here, get everything set up, and, you know, we're going to keep at it. And this is like the thing, like I like doing this stuff live because it's kind of cool, like when things don't go right, because sometimes you're going to have days where, you know, stuff is just going to like backfire and not work. And so you're like, man, just got to do my best. And that's all we could do. Sometimes we could just only do our best. And Sharon says she had resolved the code issue yesterday that was driving her nuts. Totally get it. It's probably like the type of day I'm having today. Is the day where, good, the sound's still good. Fantastic. Today is like the day. It's like, oh my God, I'm losing my mind. Like, I don't know, like, what it is. I went for a jog. I think I should have jogged, like, way earlier in my day. I'm, like, still sweating from the jog. And then I decided to drink, like, scalding hot tea. Because drinking coffee at night is not a good idea. But anyway, we're getting there. We're getting there. So, first of all, we're going to take a look what we have so far. And what I'm actually going to do is show you the deployed project here. Make sure that it still works, where we at. But for now, let me share my screen here. And so this is kind of what we have so far. So if you're familiar, we're working on our front-end project, which is powered by Strapi. And the reason I decided to go with Strapi because I didn't want to build my API from scratch. But this is all the front-end stuff here. React.js on the front end, using style components and Tailwind to style it. Making our requests via REST. For our backend, we're using Strapi via REST API. For database, we have Postgres. And then eventually when we're going to upload images, we're going to use Cloudinary. And for this project, we have the front end deployed Netlify, and the backend is deployed on DigitalOcean. All the views that we created so far, we have the login view, the sign up view, the teams view. And here's the first initial sprint that we're doing. Here's some of the things that we have actually accomplished that are working. We have done create account. You could add a name and a last name when you create an account. We have our login, we have a logout. You're able to create a team, delete a team, update a team, and, you know, see the teams. And today we're going to work on only showing our team. And the way we're going to focus on setting it up is by creating a custom controller. If you're not sure what a controller is or whatever, we're going to talk about that. That's the whole point of doing these live streams. And you could actually check out the project live here. And I'll put the link here. If you guys, you could try to create accounts here and break stuff, which is perfectly fine. If you go to community1project.com, I'll throw it there in the chat. And we're able to log in, but we're also able to, I'm hoping this still works, sign up. So I'm going to call test user 2. And then I'm going to put some weird email, test user 2 at email.com. And I'm going to make test user as the password. You know, whatever, it works. And when I click register, voila, it works. We're able to register. And our user is created on the backend and it's saved to our backend. So this project is, you're currently watching the live version and it's deployed on DigitalOcean, but I'm going to run it in our local environment in just a second. So far, we're able to create a user, we're able to log in, log out, we're able to create a team, right? Which is fantastic. We add a team, we're able to edit the team, did a thing, right? Thing. When you don't know what to type, you type heh. Why not? And you could save, and all this gets edited. But the issue that we currently have right now, when we're signed in as a user, we're able to see all the teams regardless the team that we added, which is not cool, because if you want to have your teams only show like visible to you, that we should have the functionality. Not like it doesn't matter who I log in here, I'm going to see all these three teams. And so today we're going to work on fixing it. We're going to work on creating a custom controller, and I want to do that because I just want to go through the process of creating a custom controller and adding it to our backend. But then we could also fix this by creating a policy. And if you're not kind of sure how backends work, we'll talk about that in just a second. But let me just kind of start my application here in the front from my local environment. So my team client, so we want to do npm run start. So while this starts, let me go start the backend. npm run develop for our backend. All right, and guys and gals, if you guys have questions, definitely let me know. I'd love to chat about it. And again, the point of these streams that I do is kind of showcase that it's okay for everybody to code, to work on their personal projects. You don't have to constantly do tutorials forever, right? Do tutorials forever is not going to help you get better at coding. So I'd much rather code live and fail, right? Like I do all the time here, and you know, code live and embarrass myself than not code at all. And I think like there's this concept, you know, learning in public, where you basically talk about all the things you learn publicly. And I think it's a great way for everybody to learn, because it forces you to not only learn and understand what you're doing, but also be able to explain it to somebody else. And if you're having a hard time explaining a concept to somebody else, that means you have to learn it better, practice it more. And this is why I love these live streams. And, you know, I had Jack Harrington on like a couple of days ago, and he's like, aren't you afraid that you might not be putting your best work forward? And, you know, to me, programming is a learning process, and I much rather learn in public, make mistakes, learn from my mistakes. And the good news, I have you guys to help me as well. So if something I miss, you guys could help me out. And if something that you don't know, I could show you as well. So it works great. So this is our local front end. And let me pull up our local host. Let me, it's 1337. Let me bring the admin panel so you could see what we're working here on the back end. Log in. So this is our back end, by the way. And so we currently have two items. So you have teams, which is the teams that you're able to create. And if you don't see the team that I just created, because I created it on our deployed application, but I'll add one here on our local running application. And we have users. And currently we have one user here. So let's go to our front end here. First of all, watch what happens when I log in as Paul Bratzlovsky. And this is like, I want to first show you the issue that we have so we could talk about how to fix it. When I log into my application, you see all the teams here. And let's say I create a new team. And I'm going to call this is Paul's team, right here. And I'm going to submit. So we just created a new team. We could go to our backend. We're going to refresh. And let's go to teams. And notice we have, this is Paul's team. This is a new team created. Team owner is Paul Bratzlovsky, right? And now let's go ahead. And Big B420, what's up? Great to see you here. Nice, good. I want you guys to use the app and break it. And with over time, we're going to add more functionality, which will be fantastic. So now I'm going to go log in as Paul Bratzlovsky, right? Here we go. I logged in. I created a team. I'm going to log out. And I'm going to go, and by the way, this is running locally, but that's okay. I'm going to sign up. And I'm going to call this new user. And we're going to give fake email because it doesn't matter at this point. New user at email.com. And password is going to be test user. Why not? And I'm going to register. And here's the issue. I just registered as a new user. And I'm able to see all the other teams. I should not be able to see Paul teams. I should not be able to see anybody else's team. I should only see the teams that I create. And for that fact, have the ability to edit, delete. And that's what we're going to work on. So if I create a new team, this is going to be new users team. Hello. right? I should only see my teams. And this is exactly the issue we're going to work on. And this is what we're going to talk about. And this is how we're going to figure out how to fix. So right now, if we look at our back end, we have 2 users. We look at teams, and we have a bunch of teams. And let me, oops. Back, I think I have to, no, I keep clicking the wrong thing. Let me show team owner here. And so what I want to be able to do is, if I log in as Paul Braslavsky, I should only see Paul Braslavsky teams. And if I log in as a new user, I should only see new user teams. I shouldn't be able to see everybody's team, because this means that any one of you right now who goes in and logs into this application, you'll be able to delete everybody else's team. And there's lots of different ways to handle this, but I want to talk about this idea of creating a custom controller to handle getting this data, and that's what we're going to work on today. And what I want to talk about here, actually, let me go to my GitHub, and I'm going to kind of show some code. A while ago, I was working on a Koa application, which is basically a backend application, Koa basic server. I'm just going to show it here in a second. And we have an example here. If you click on API, I'm going to show you the structure here. And we have this idea of config, which is going to be like the configuration for our routes. So we have to kind of define a route. So when we make a post request or get request, wherever it is, we want to have routes that we point to hit our controller. So we're going to have a route with some name. It's going to be pointing to our new controller that we make. That's just the general idea, right? So whenever we hit a certain URL, let's say community one project, get all my users, it'll be the route that we hit, and we want it to point to a specific controller. So what we're going to have a controller which is going to extend, right? This is just examples of controllers. So we're going to create our own, where we're going to create all team controller. It's going to look similar to this, which will allow us to do some sort of logic that will allow us to get the data that we want. And normally, that's what happens. You create a route that points to a controller, and then you have your services. And this is something that you could call from within your controller. Maybe you have some sort of functions that handle your communication with the database. That's the general idea. So what we have to remember is that we have to create a route that points to a controller, and our controller is going to call a service, and that service is going to be responsible to handling the logic with our backend. And because I wanted to show you, by the way, this is not Strapi, right? The example that I showed you. This is using Koa.js, which is created by the same people that created Express. And so this is why I'm showing you this simple example of Koa.js, because Strapi is actually using Koa underneath the hood. And so I wanted to kind of show you this example. So when you look at the Strapi code, it's going to look very similar to you guys. So if we go to our application here, I'll show you in a second. Notice when we go to our admin section, we have our API, and you see our teams. And then we have our content type, which defines the schema for our content, right? Let me make this smaller. And let me know if you guys have any questions. We have our controllers. And right now, we have a custom team controller here that we're going to work on. And we basically create a custom find controller that allows us to find all the items. And actually, I forgot that we did this. So we're going to create a custom control. Here we are overriding, and the reason why I did this is because I wanted to be able to populate team members and team owners whenever we get the data for our team. And we're going to add another controller here that's going to Yeah, I totally forgot that I did this, which is fine. You're going to create a custom controller that's going to get only teams that belong to your logged in user. But then I'm going to show you, maybe not this video, but in a later video, where you could actually write policies which could check some sort of logic. For instance, if the so we're going to handle it in controller logic first, but then we're going to create later a policy which we could just pass to our controllers. You could think of a policy, something that runs before your code hits the controller. And if I'm being confusing, let me know, because I'd like to, of course, help you guys clear up. And also it helps me to kind of review this information. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to strapi.com, because I just want to show you, if those of you are interested in following along and you want to use Strapi as an API, and you could go to the documentation and you could kind of basically look stuff up that you want to figure out how to do in Strapi. And the reason why I like Strapi, a lot of people are like, why do you use Strapi, blah, blah, blah. Because creating something from scratch, like a backend API, it just takes many hours. So I look at it as a jump start to get a fast API that is highly customizable, where I could use Strapi instead and focus on creating everything on the front end. And this way, I don't have to be a master full stack developer to create an awesome application that's going to look good on my resume. So if I go to backend customization, it's going to show us, my computer's thinking for a while. Let me sip some tea. Big B420 says, yeah, it's a lot of stuff working together. I'm going to look at the flowchart to see what's going on. Yes, I might be lost too, which is fine. And then Sharon says, I don't know enough to be confused. Yeah, and so for me, you know, like, I'm like sweating from the tea and the jog that I had. But for me, it's just like, I want to code in the raw, where half the time, like, I don't even know what I'm trying to do. And the reason why I want to do it this way is because I want you guys to understand that it's normal feeling to feel stuck. And this is why I'm showing you how I'm using documentation to look stuff up, and because that's what a lot of us will have to do. And so as we could see here, we could read what routes are. Routes handle requests and trigger the execution of our controller. And then we could see policies here, and the reason why policies and middleware is listed before the controller, because you could set up policies, which is basically a middleware or a middleware that's gonna do some sort of function, and depending on what that function does, it's either gonna reject or pass the logic or whatever to the controller. So policies and middleware run before the controller. What we're going to do today, we're going to create a route, and we're going to create a custom controller to do certain logic, and we're going to handle that logic within the controller. And then next week we're going to come back, we're going to check not inside the controller, but we're going to create a policy that we could just pass to multiple controllers, which will check the logic that we want. So what are we going to do today? We're going to create a controller that's going to check the user that's logged in, and then we're going to find that user's teams and only show those teams. And the way we're going to handle it, we're going to handle it on the back end. So there's no way someone from the front end, unless they're authenticated, could get somebody else's team, right? It's not going to happen. So that's what we're going to work on. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to click on routes, and we could take a look here. They show a bunch of stuff here, but generally, if you want to create a custom route, they basically show an example here. You need to create a custom route file and set up your routes following this example. And this is just the way this works in Strapi, and it was similar to the example I showed that worked in code. So what I'm going to do first is we're going to create that route. And so let me switch my screen here. Oh my goodness. All right, so this is our backend application. We have our controller folders, we have our route folders. So if you see this teams and it uses create core router. This is what Strapi is using to create its own routes to the controllers that are already given to us. Whenever you create a content type object in Strapi, it will automatically create find one, delete and update controllers for you to use, and it will automatically make those routes. And this is what this is. You could use this to either extend an existing route, but if you're going to create a custom route, you would go into the routes folder and you would create a new file, and I'm going to call this custom routes just in case, you know, so we don't get confused. We know that this is what that's going to be. It's going to be our custom routes for our team that we're going to go here. And the pattern here that we saw is that we're going to return a object that's going to define those routes for us. And so I'm going to create an object, and that object takes an array of routes. And what we're going to do, we're going to define our routes here. So the method is going to be get, because we want to get our teams, and we're going to create a path, which is going to, my autocorrect automatically does weird stuff, which is not correct, but we're going to create a custom route, and it's going to go and hit the teams route, and we're going to say get my teams. Actually, I'm gonna do camel case. Get my teams. That's what we're going to do, and we're going to point it to a controller that we want to use. And Shiam throwing bunch of fire emojis. I love it, and I love the fire emoji because it works both ways. It's like, oh, this stream is fire, like this stream is awesome, or this stream is on fire, like, oh my god, crash and burning hard. And you know, the truth is I do a little bit of both here. And so we're going to where's my mouse? Where'd my mouse go? Handler. We're going to create our handler, and what the handler is going to point to is our teams. Actually, it's team, not teams, and I'll tell you why. This refers to the folder structure that we're in. So we're going to be in team, and we're going to be inside the team controller that we haven't created yet, and we're going to create a controller called get my teams, right? That's actually going to be the route. This is going to be here. That's pointing to that folder, get my teams. And so, and this should be using object notation. I apologize to you guys. In theory, this is what it's got to be. And so we're going to keep working on it. Let's see what happens. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a basic controller. We have a place here. We go to controllers. We go to team.js, and I already extended some of the controllers that I wanted to have custom functionality, but we're going to create a new controller here. We're going to call it get my teams, and we're going to put a sync in the front. You know what's interesting? Like, this is fine, get my teams, and it'll get, we'll just pass the contacts here. And then let's just kind of console log hello here. See if we could even hit it here. See what happens. So let's see here. Let's see what's going to happen. What's up, Engine Boy? Good to see you, my man. Last stream, you were the master that spotted the mistake we were making, helped me figure it out. So in theory, we should be able to see this controller inside that we created. So if I restart my development environment here for my backend, make sure things don't crash, we should have route that we set up under our custom routes. And then we should have, when we hit that route, it should go to get my teams, and it should fire that controller. Let me just hide some of the stuff for now we don't need. And we should be able to see this console log. And to make it apparent, let me do this. We're gonna do that. Okay, so this is what we did. And for now, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna check out if we actually able to see the newly created controller that we did. So if we go to, let me close this stuff now because we don't need it at the moment. Let me go into our backend Strapi application, refresh. So if we go to our settings, go to our roles, and we're going to start with public first. We're going to go to teams, and check this out. We have get my teams controller that we created, and it's showing the route that we want to hit. So if we go to this route, we should hit this get my teams controller. Let me save it here. And that should show us this console log hello. And the way we're going to test it, we're going to use Insomnia. Let me see. I thought I had it open somewhere. Let me open it. Insomnia. Yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments, let me know. And again, all these streams, you know, like anybody that's joining me, like I'm amazed because watching somebody code, like sometimes it's boring as heck, and I get it. And so I'm going to make a new request. I could probably copy. We're gonna get post, get, no, we're gonna create one, get teams. So I'll just make a new one. Come on, let me make a new one. New request. We're gonna call it get all my teams. Get all my teams is going to be get request, and we're going to, I just want to make sure that I get the right URL. It's localhost 1337. And it's going to make sure we get the right URL, which is API team get my teams. Control copy here. Actually, we could change it to teams. That would make sense, but we'll do that after we get this to work. Remember, the secret is get it working first and then focus on refactor. So this is our front end. Okay, this is where we want to test. So in theory, if I go to this URL and this endpoint, we should be able to see the console log. We get not found, but I'm curious if we were able to hit the controller. And yes, we did. You could see here we have this console log hello, right? And so we are able to hit the controller and it works. So this is, let me close this now because you know that works. This is our controller. We created, so quick review. First, we created our route to point to the path or the URL that we want to trigger hitting that controller. The handler, it basically allows you to point to the controller that you want to use. And if you look at our folder structure here, we have inside our controllers, we have our team, and it creates using object notation. And within our team, we have our get my teams controller. And that's handler is basically pointing to this controller here. So the good news here, what we're using to get all of our teams, the logic is here. This is the same exact logic. But right now, regardless what you pass here, it will always return all the teams here. So if I copy this, right, and I post it here, we should be able to get a response of all the teams. Now the issue is between this controller and the one that we want to make, we don't want someone to pass additional params here, right? Why? Because we don't want someone to, you know, use their JW token and then pass a different user ID and then be able to get all the teams from the front end. We don't want that because we want to make sure it's secure where you're only getting the teams for that user. But for now, we're just going to kind of use that general code example from Find that we were using before. And what it's going to do is basically going to use a service that Strapi already created called the find method, which will basically take any arguments that we pass from the front end, and it's going to return all the teams with the team members and the team owners. So let's see if that works, by the way. So let me restart the server again. So we're going to go back to here. So before we got 404 because we weren't returning anything. So let's see if we return our teams now. So I'm going to hit send. And look at that. We got Paul's team. We got Tuesday live stream team. So we're basically getting all the teams. So that works, and that's fantastic. So now what we got to do is we got to figure out, wait a second, I don't want to get all the teams. I only want to get the teams that are associated with this team owner. Now, a more appropriate way to fix this would probably be by creating a policy, but I just wanted to show you this idea of and introduce you to what are controllers and how they work. And so the basic idea, if you just to quickly review before we continue, and let me check if anybody have questions. Nobody has questions. Fantastic. But if you did have questions, I would love to answer them. So I'm just gonna, this is our front end. So basically we have our endpoint, and this is what we set up in our route. So if you see teams get my teams. So the first thing we did is number one, we created a route, and that route points to a URL that we want to use. So when someone goes to that particular URL, when they go to team get my teams, it's going to trigger this handler, which is pointing to our controller. So what you have to remember is you have a URL via the routes. That's going to point to an associated controller, and that's going to trigger the logic inside the controller that we created. We just created this get my teams controller, and then you could also have services that are called from within the controller. So you could write all your logic inside the controller, but to make the code much nicer to read, especially if you have repeatable functions, you could save them as services, right? And in Strapi, this is auto-generated for the basic services that come out of the box, but we could also create our own, which we'll do in a later video when we create a service to send an email. So, but basically, to review, we hit a route, and we define our custom route here, and that route is going to hit our controller that we define here, and now we want to do some sort of logic. And so in Strapi, we have this context state object, ctx.state, and that would have your user information. But right now here, let me just kind of show you here, const state. Actually, I could destructure it, and we're going to get it from our context. But the issue right now, we're not logged in right now, right? And so we might not even have a user, but we're still returning data. So what we want to make sure, not only do we want to make this controller use authorization, which with Strapi is super easy to do, but we also want to make sure that we're actually getting the user. And so the way things stand now, let me do console log for state here so we could see what's happening. I can't do commas today. So this should be state. So we're going to see what happens. All right, so let me restart the server here. Yes, and if you guys have questions or not, let me know. Or if anything you want to talk about, you know, it's perfectly fine. And so now let's go. We have our route that we're going to hit, blah, 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 blah. And right now we're set permissions for public. We basically gave Strapi permissions in our teams to allow us to hit this endpoint, get my teams, without needing authorization or being logged in. And so the first change we're going to do is change it to make it authorized. But for now, we're not going to do that. I just want to see what it calls. So let's click send again. So we get all the stuff, no issues, everything works fine. Let's see what we console logged so we got the context, we got the state, but as you can see, there's no user state, right? User doesn't exist. Why? Because we're not firing this request as a authorized or logged in user. So the first thing we're going to do is change this request to be an authorized request, meaning that you should be a logged in user that's making that request. So let's go ahead here to Strapi. And what I'm going to do, instead of roles in public, I'm actually going to remove it from here, and I'm going to go roles and authenticate it. This is something that Strapi gives out of the box for you guys. So when you're starting out, you're able to customize the application as much as you want, but at the same time, certain niceness to have, like permissions, you have out of the box, which is awesome. So you're going to go to team, and we're going to create get my teams, and now it's going to be authorized request. That means we need to be able to pass a JWT token to make it work. So now if I save it here and go back to Insomnia, which is way better than Postman in my opinion, making requests, is this going to work? I click send, and no, it doesn't. It says forbidden, and the reason why is because we now need to pass authorization token. And so the first thing we have to do, we have to get a token that we're going to pass to with this request. So I'm going to first log in, and I'm going to do it this way. Hold on, login user. Let me see what the body is. This is the return. I made this too big. Query header docs. It's too big. So I'm going to log in as Paul Basovsky, the password test user. I click send. So when we log in, we get the JWT token, and this is what we want to pass to our request when making our request. And I have an example here. Basically what we need to do, we need to add our bearer token, and we're going to do it from Insomnia first. And prefix it with bearer to say, hey, we're passing this token into our request to make sure that we get it. So the token is something that you get back when you log in. So basically, when we log in as a user, we get a JWT token, which is kind of interesting and cool here. Let me kind of go here. There's a cool website that I found out about recently. I think it's JWT. Is it this one? I'm gonna see. Yeah, it's this website. And so basically, this is what you get. You get a generated token, and as you can see, this is the token that we got from Strapi, and it's encoded. It has a header, payload, and a verification signature that allows you to verify if the token is valid. If you want to learn more about it, you could go to this jwt.io website and read more about it. And I have to actually read more about it here as well. But basically, this token has all this information, which allows us to basically use it as a key when making a request to prove that we are authorized user. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Insomnia, and we're going to try again. We're going to go to our get all my teams. We're going to make a authorized bearer token request. We're going to pass our token, and I think we put bearer as a prefix. And in theory, now we should be able to hit the controller that we created. So I click send, and sure enough, we have 200 OK. We have all the information. As you could see, as we get all the information, we're still getting all the teams. We're getting all the teams, not just teams for the logged in user. But here's the cool thing. If you go to our backend now, we now are able to get a user object. You see guys here, we have our user object, that we're returning because we're now making a request with an authorized user. And we are user with ID of 1. So now what we could do in our controller, and if you're not too familiar with the way find method works, you could pass certain parameters into here. And one of those is a filter parameter, which allows you to define your search for what you're looking for. And you could find a lot of examples on the Strapi documentation. If you go to Strapi, my computer, oh no, it's freezing. Don't freeze, computer. Be nice. So if I type filter, REST API filtering, and it shows you a couple of examples. And basically, you could pass an object like filter. You could say, I want username to equal something, something. And basically, it will allow you to search for what you need. And you could read more on this, but we're going to do a very basic implementation of this where we're going to basically check, or ask for our find service to get all the items that have a matching user ID. So if we look at our Strapi application here, let's go to Content Manager, Users. We have our users. If you go to our teams, and I'm going to click on one, notice how we have team owner. So what we're going to do, we're going to basically search, get back team where team owner equals to user ID. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. So let's see here. Let's actually go ahead and do that now. And I just want to kind of show you here. The reason why we pass in context, because context has all these different parameters and everything else. And this find method will take what it needs from the context and use it for the query. But we don't want anybody to pass, the query from the front end. We just want people to go to this endpoint and automatically get the teams that they have based on their logged in information. So we're going to remove this here. And we're going to put, instead, we're going to put basically our params of what we want to get. And so what we're going to do, we're going to throw our filters. And in our filters, we're going to basically search for, did I call it team member, team owner, I believe. And that team owner expects an ID actually, which is going to be CTX, I believe. That, what am I doing? CTX.user, CTX.user.id. And what we're going to do, we're actually going to do it here. We're going to CTX.state.user, and we're going to get the ID out. And let's console log the ID and see if we're actually getting the ID when we make the request. This should be ID of user. And it's awesome. Like, so Shim here, Engine Boy, he created his own application. He wrote the backend himself, so he's not even using Strapi. And he says, nice, that's how I also retrieve user-specific staff from a backend of his project. And this is what I like about Strapi, is that at the end of the day, it's made with Node and Koa, which is basically exactly what you would do if you were creating your own backend yourself. So this way, instead of writing all this stuff from scratch, I'm able to just utilize some of the stuff that they have out of the box, which is pretty awesome. So let's do ID here. We're going to pass the ID. See if this blows up. It might blow up. So basically what we're saying, we're going to get our ID from the logged in user because it's saved in, in state. We should be able to see that ID. Then for the service, we're passing a filter and we're looking for like return everything that has team owner with the ID of the logged in user. And that should return the data. In theory, we're going to see here. Let me close all this other stuff so it's not confusing. So let's kind of go ahead here and check it out. Make sure my API is running. It's not running. Let me get it started. Yeah, and by the way, guys, I encourage all of you guys to keep building your projects, work on your own, and try recording yourself. Even if you don't share it with anybody, record yourself coding. Like, use it like as a learning experience to help you guys. Let me make this smaller. Yeah, that's good enough, right? You guys see it. So you're gonna go get all my teams. We're passing the token, and now we hit send, and we're getting one, 2, 3 teams, which is fantastic. And all these teams belong to Paul Braslavsky because he has ID of 1. And let's take a look what we return here. So notice how the ID is 1. And what's awesome about this particular implementation, we're not passing anything from the front end. We're letting the backend decide, okay, do you have a logged in user? If you do, because it's saved in state, get that user and look up all the teams that belong to that user. So we have the ID, we have this user, and what I'm going to do, for now, I'm going to leave it like so. So we know this works. So let me go ahead and log in as the other user. So we have 2 users. We have new user at gmail.com here. Let me log in as new user at email.com and see if we get the right teams first. So let me go to Insomnia. And right now we're doing everything using Insomnia to test our API. Once our API works, we're going to make those changes and make those refactoring changes in our front end. So now this is all good. We know we got the user. So what I want to do is come here and I want to log in first. And I want to log in as a different user. So when I log in as new user at email.com, we should get a different token which correlate to that particular user. So hit send. Notice how we get the token. I'm hoping that it's different, and it is. And notice we get back different user information. So now I'm going to go to get all my teams. I'm going to change the token for the authorized user. I'm going to click send. And notice what we get. We only get one team that's associated with that user. So the only way that you'll be able to see your teams as a logged in user, or I should say the only teams you're going to be able to see are the teams that belong to you, because there's no way to pass a different team ID because all of this logic is happening on the back end. So the coolest thing here, all we have to do is make this authorized request to get my teams, and you're only returning your teams. So let's just finalize this in the back end here. So we know this works. This is the front end and the back end. So we know this works. This returns the appropriate team information that we need. And there's some issues here, like for instance, why if you don't get a user? Why if this is like a not like authorized, not authorized, but people just, I mean, it's not going to happen because this is not a publicly open endpoint. But if it was, it would, the CTX state would not return a state user, right? So we could write a check here, and what I'll do it later, but I'm going to write a check. And this is something I like to do in my code, is to do little to-dos where you could like look them up eventually. And what I want to do is I want to make sure check if user is logged in before proceeding, right? If not, we could return an error here, and that way it'll never fire to this logic. Right now it's not an issue because the only way we hit this controller is when we're logged in. But I'm just going to put this note here. And basically we're getting all the teams where the team owner matches the user ID, which we're getting from context. So for now, I'm going to leave it as this. And we could always come back and refactor. And the reason why I do to do specifically is because I could go here and I could search to do. You see like this. And I'm able to quickly find all the places where I wrote little notes for myself, and it makes it very easy for me to find stuff that I'm looking for that I want to change, rather than having random comments which don't have like a certain thing. I think there's a VS Code extension which allows these to be like different color. I don't remember what it was, but regardless, let's go back to our Teams controller here. So we know this works. Hey, what's up? Learn in public. I love it. I love it. Good to see you, man. That's what I'm doing. Like, I fail in public and eventually I remember stuff, and hence I'm learning stuff. So this is fantastic. And what we're doing is we created a custom route. We created a custom controller. And so now we're able to get teams that only belong to our users. So now what we could do is we could go to our front end in theory, and we should be able to, instead of hitting the general find controller that we had, which would basically return all the teams regardless, we're actually going to use our custom controller that we created called Get My Teams. And I think the way we implemented it in our front end, this change should be fairly easy. And all I have to remember, I just have to remember the URL that we're hitting. And I could actually copy and paste it from Insomnia because we tested. So it's API team get my teams. So I'm going to copy this. And so now we're going to go to our front end application. So this is our back end. The work here is done. Before we go into the front end, let's quickly review what we did. So generally, when you're working on a back end, and let me bring up the Strapi notes, but these apply to any back end you're working on. Let me just find backend customization, backend customization. So normally you have a request which will go that you type in your URL, and it could be get, post, put, delete, whatever, and that's going to hit your route. Your route, and if you have stuff like in general, your route is going to point to a controller. And you could set up policies, which we'll do in next section, because the same thing we accomplished within our controller, we could also set up a policy called like is team owner, which could have the logic that we define in this controller, but we'll talk about later. And the middlewares, they happen before a controller. But in general, for now, not talking about policies, not talking about middleware, we have a route. That route, when we make a request to this route, will trigger the controller, and then that controller is going to call a service. And so if we look at our basic Koa application that I did before, so you guys could see here, I have my routes, and I'm just showing you this. This is not Strapi. This is a Koa application. I have my routes. They basically have a route, point to a controller. We pass the method. And in my Koa application, depending on the route you go to, is going to go to a specific controller that it's going to trigger. And then from that controller, it's going to call a service. And by the way, this is not a Strapi code I'm showing you guys here. This is a Koa backend application, which is very similar to Node. It was basically made by the same people that made Express. So basically, you have your route that hits your controller, and from your controller, you could call your service, which could be talking to your database. And in this case, I'm using MongoDB to do certain thing for now. And now if we look at the actual code in our Strapi application, it's the same idea, right? So all you have to remember, you have a route that you define somewhere, somehow, and that route is going to point to a controller. And then from your controller, if you define additional services, you could call your services, or you could have all your logic within the controller. I think having services or functions that you call from your controller allows you to make cleaner code. So now we're able to get, what's up, Northern Chimp? How you doing? We're able to get the data. So basically what we did, we created a custom controller, get my teams, that returns only the teams for that particular user. So now we know that works because we tested it here. Bam, look, I'm only getting my teams for that particular user. And notice how we're right now getting password and all the secret information that we don't want to get. We're going to work on sanitizing the data later so you don't get information that you shouldn't get about your users, but we do that later. For now, we just want to get our specific teams that we want to have. And so now let's go to our front end and find where we're calling our teams. So this is our front end. Let's see here. We're going to go and find, man, like people that make full stack applications is so much work. I'm glad that we have something like Strapi or other CMSs that you could use, or something that makes, I know some people like using Superbase or like whatever. There's so many things that are available that makes our job easier. And I say it's okay to start with doing things that make your life easier as you're learning, because to become full stack developer, it will take some time, especially a good one. So I suggest learn front-end development, but understand how back-end works. So right now we're working on some back-end stuff, but I still don't consider myself a back-end developer. I consider myself being a front-end developer that understands some back-end code, which allows me to create more complex applications. So we go to our dashboard. So we have this page called Teams, never mind. And then in Teams, we're making a request and let me just double check here. What's interesting here is that, let's see, use blah, 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 use fetch query. We want to get team URL, response, await fetch teams. So we are passing ID to team URL, but interestingly, that still wasn't working. So whatever this implementation here originally wasn't correct, but at this point, it doesn't matter because we're going to use our custom controller that we created. Oh, wait, never mind. This is update request. Forget what I said. This is delete. This is correct. Update request is correct. I'm trying to find the one that we need. Okay, fetch query. Where are we calling fetch query? That's what. So fetch query is our custom callback function that's coming back from our use fetch query hook, which basically allows us to pass a URL and options that we want to pass. Let me go back here, delete the URL that we want to hit. And this hook, let me show you where it is. Go to definition. We'll basically call a fetch. Let me show you here. See, I'm calling basic fetch here. But what we're able to do is we're able to pass our options with our authorization. And you could look at this in more detail, or if you have questions about it, we could chat about this more. But basically, I created this hook to allow us to pass any URL or endpoint with whatever options we need. And it will basically put those options into our basic fetch call, set the loading state, if we get data back, and all we basically we get back the data, the loading state, error if there's any, and we get this callback function that we could use to get initial data or use it to refetch the data as needed. So now, basically, if I go to Teams here, all I need to do here, this Teams URL needs to point to our custom controller. So instead of being API Teams, it's going to be API Teams get my teams, which is basically our custom controller that we created. So we just have to point from not the generic controller that came out of the box with Strapi, but point it to our, let me paste it in here. Did I this should be like this, to I get my team's control. So now in theory, what's going to happen is that it's going to run that fetch request against this URL that's going to hit our custom controller that we defined inside our controllers via our route right here. So in theory, that should work. That should work. So we're going to see. We're going to see if that works, if it works or not. I believe that's the only change we had to do. So let me close Insomnia because we no longer need it, because now we're working from our front end. So if I go to our front end, and it does work. Notice what we see now. This is fantastic. Guess what we see now? We only getting our own team. Only getting the teams that belong to us, which is beautiful and fantastic. So now let me log out. Okay, let's take a look at the users that we have. We have two users. We have Paul Braslavsky, user, and Paul Braslavsky has 3 teams that he created. So let's log in as Paul Braslavsky. Test user, log in, and boom, we only have my teams that belong to me. We no longer see all the teams. So we fixed the issue that we had at the beginning before we started, where we were showing everybody's team. So now when I delete a team, I'm only deleting my own team. And let me see, I must have broke something because now delete's not working. That's a different issue. Oh, I know why. Because we changed the controller that we are receiving data with. So when we're refetching the data, we need to point that, and I'll show you like right now what the issue is. So we change the ability to get data using our custom controller that only returns our current team. So if I look at network here and try to hit delete, method not allowed, preview, response, header. Yeah, so I'm still calling get my teams. This URL is wrong, so I got to fix it, which we'll fix in a second. But the good news is that we're working. And this is, it's important after you make changes, is to test your application to make sure that things work. And so the issue here is I changed the team URL here, and then I'm using it not just in fetch, but I'm using it in handle update, handle delete request, and then I'm also using it in getting the team. So for handle update and handle delete, we still want to use the original controller. So the fix here would be is to do this. Let's copy this like this. Let's revert this back to what we had it here. And now what we want to do is go to the fetch query. And instead of passing team URL, we're just going to pass const get all teams URL that we want to point to the appropriate controller. And that's what we want to pass into this fetch request. And that should fix the problem, because now the fetch request will use our custom control that we made, but the handle update request and handle delete request will use the original controllers that were set up prior to this. So let's kind of go back. Let's check it out again. So now I'm going to refresh again. So we only get my teams, and now I'm going to hit delete, and delete worked, but it didn't refresh the screen, which we'll take a look at why that didn't work. I know if I do manual refresh here, it actually deletes the team. So I have to fix this issue. When I hit delete, it needs to refetch the teams, and it is calling refetch, but it's calling the wrong URL. We want to refetch from the custom control that we created, but we'll get to there as we get there. For now, I just want to make sure that the teams work, which they seem to work. So fetch query, get all teams. Let me copy this. I'll share where it's breaking. So handle delete request. So notice the issue we're having is when we're refetching the query, we were using the wrong URL because now we're looking up for teams using a custom controller. So we're going to, I'm sorry, here, get all teams. Get all teams. That's what we want to use, the new controller that we just created when we're deleting. And we might have to do the same thing in update. I don't remember. Handle update request. Update functions. Okay, no, we don't have to do that here because it functions slightly. Oh, yes. So we're not, after we're updating the data, we're saving that data locally to state, and we're not making a second request to get the data back because it doesn't matter in this case. So now our delete should work and it should refresh our screen. And if you have questions, let me know, because I just confused the living daylights out of myself by explaining that to you. So now I'm logged in as Paul Boslawski. I could create a new team. The other guy should not see this team, meaning if I logged in with another user. Hello. Submit. This is interesting. When we create the team, again, it fired the wrong URL. We want to make sure that we called get teams. So create team has to get adjusted. And again, I'm just going one by one. And the reason why we're getting all this additional data that we were getting before is because we were using the old controller. But we have to make sure that when we create the team, we are hitting, when we're refreshing, we're hitting this URL. So I have to find where we have our create team form. Create team form. And here we should have our, so the URL is actually going to be this one, get all my teams, not the generic one that we were using before. And so now I'm going to pass the right URL, get all teams. Actually, I need both because we have, let's see here, create team form. So let me just close some of the stuff. So handle form submit. So we want to use, so handle form submit. This is the response, blah, 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 blah. So this, okay, team, let me see here. So we're team URL fetch. Okay, so I'm hard coding it here. This is fine. And I'm using fetch query to refetch the data. We just want to point it to the new controller that we created, which is get all teams. That should fix the issue here. What's up, Luke? Good to see you, my man. You know, tonight's stream, just as always, struggle after struggle after struggle. And you know what? I love struggling and failing because I feel like if you could fail in public and recover, you're definitely going to remember that lesson. So that's what we're doing. We're failing publicly and recovering. Okay, so now we should not have that weird issue. So let's create another team. Test, test. And when I hit submit, I shouldn't have all those other weird teams that we saw before. I should only get teams associated with my user. Submit. Okay, that works. Now for delete, when I delete, it should delete this team and only return when it refreshes the screen with the users associated with me. That still works. Let's double check if edit works. pulse team 1, save, refresh. Yeah, that still works. Let's do delete. That works. Let's refresh to make sure that worked. Great. So everything works. So the other guy should not see this team. So now what we're going to do, we're going to log in as a different user. And the different user should not see this team, right? Because you should only be able to see the teams that belong to you. And this is why we created Get My Teams controller, which does all that logic in the backend. There's no arguments. Like, notice when we're making this request here, we're not passing anything in the header, right? We don't need to. We on our backend, checking the state for our backend and making sure, is there a logged in user? If so, get the ID for that user. And if that user has teams, return those teams only for that particular user. And this is awesome and pretty secure because there's nothing you could pass here to get items that you shouldn't get. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out. Let's see what other users we have. We have new user email, copy. Let's go here. Let's log in as the new different user. And we should not see test user. So notice we only see new user team. We no longer see this other guy shouldn't see the team, right? So everything works. So not only you only see the teams that belong to you, you no longer have access to other people's team, right? If I log into this application, which is a team manager, I should only be able to manage teams that belong to me only. And so we did that by creating a custom controller because I wanted to show you the process, especially how to do this in Strapi. And if you follow the general logic, it's the same way you would do in Node or Koa or even Python, which is the basic idea. You have a route, or you have a request that goes to a particular route. That route triggers the code in the controller. That controller calls a service, and it'll do some action on the database in general. And so for us, that's working. And the last thing I want to check is, why if I create a completely new user, if I go to sign up, and Joe Baker, it's going to be some dude, and joe@baker.com, test user. And so when I sign in as Joe Baker, he should have 0 teams, right? He should have no teams whatsoever. So let's see it, register. Boom. Joe Baker's got no teams because he just created his account. So let's create a team as Joe Baker. Only Joe Baker should see this. Hello. Submit. Okay, only Joe Baker's team. Let's log out from Joe Baker's team. Let's log in as Paul Braslavsky. Sign in. Boom. No Joe Baker's team. This is Paul's team. And if I log in back as Joe Baker, we should only see Joe Baker's team. Log out. Joe Baker. Sign in. Boom. Only Joe Baker should see this. So we did it. Instead of getting all the teams, we're now only getting the teams that belong to that user. Here's another issue that we have. Right now, like, it's impossible to kind of make that mistake, except currently I'm authorized. And if I want to make a delete request here, I'm literally calling the delete controller and I'm passing the ID. So in general, I could kind of fake this in Insomnia, right? In our Postman, the alternative, in Insomnia, if I go to, let's say, update a post, and I know not update, let's say delete, and I know the ID, if I know the ID that I want to pass, it could be for delete, update. If I know the ID that I want to pass, in theory, from the front end, I could pass that ID and from here and delete a post that doesn't belong to me in theory. So what we would have to do, we're going to have to create a policy to pass to the rest of our controllers that will basically check, are you the owner of that post? If so, only the owner could edit, delete, or even create. And so right now in our code, we have these hey, what's up, Christopher Greens? Good seeing you here. Yeah, Joe Baker, the best dude in town. Actual dude. No, I'm just kidding. It's not an actual dude. No, you should be excited about learning React. And a lot of people they're like, oh, why use Strapi all the time? Strapi, why don't you do everything from scratch? Because I don't have enough time to do everything from scratch. Just so much stuff to learn. So what I like to do is to be really good at React, and then use something like Strapi, or there's other like CMSs available like Contentful, or you could even use Firebase if you like. Whatever it is you decide. I like Strapi because you're able to do with Postgres database. You could customize it. You get a lot out of the box. It's pretty awesome. So this way I could focus on being a front-end developer, but making like pretty functional applications that have back-end that you could customize. And so everything works, but the one thing that I was kind of getting to before I kind of saw that comment, if you go to our teams controllers, and this is, I want to give you like a preface where policies will be important, which currently we created some logic. Okay, check if we have a user with the ID and only return the post that belong to that particular, only return the teams that have the user that's logged in ID. But the issue is this test doesn't happen on our find controller, doesn't happen on our find one controller, doesn't happen on our create controller. And so basically any logged in user, let's say if they have the ID for the post, they could in theory edit or update or what have you if they know the ID of that post and they're authorized. So what we have to do is for every one of these controllers, find one, create, update, we don't have here, but imagine if we did, we need to have a check to check if the item of the ID that is passed, does it belong to a particular user? If it does, that user has permissions. And instead of doing it individually in each controller, because imagine this, if I write this logic here, and this could be more complex, I might have to write the same logic here, and same logic here, and same logic here. So instead, what you do, and I want to show you this example first, is you create a policy. And right now, we don't have policies here, but I'm going to show you kind of in the Strapi documentation. Notice how you have your request, then it hits your routes, and then your routes point to your controller. But before that happens, in Strapi you have policies, which is basically like a middleware, and you have middleware, and basically this code will always run before hitting the controller. So by creating a policy, we could create a policy is owner of team or whatever you want to call it, and whenever we hit the route, it's going to first check the policy, and the policy is either going to reject or let the permission go through. And so we could actually define that logic that we define in the current controller in a policy, and that way, instead of defining that logic in each individual controller, we just pass a policy to that controller, and that would be the better way of doing. And this is exactly what we're going to do in the next stream. We're going to basically create a policy that we'll be able to pass to each and one of these controllers to be like, hey, if the owner has permission, then you could find the post, like find all the posts that belong to that user. If user is the owner of this single team, you could return the team. And we could do it with policies, or we don't have an update controller here, but imagine if we had because we're using the one that came straight out of the box with Strapi, but if we created a custom controller here for update, we would be like, hey, does the logged in user have permission to update the team with a particular ID? And we could check that logic in the policy and then pass those policies in our routes, which will be basically, we would have an additional thing called policy. I can't type. What is happening here? Policies. And then we would pass is authenticated or is team owner. And that policy which we would create, will create a is team owner policy, which will basically do that check. Hey, does this user have permission? If so, let them hit the control, let them make the changes as they need. If they don't, reject it. Don't let them do anything. But this is something we're going to add later. And so right now, I just want to give you a quick review of what we did. On the back end, Engine Boy's back again. Yeah, and if you have any questions, let me know, because half the time I have no idea what I'm doing. But to kind of talk about what we did, basically today we created a custom route in Teams. We created a custom route here, which basically, when there's a request made to Teams get my Teams endpoint, it will hit this route. This route is going to point to our custom controller that we created inside Teams. We created this get my Teams controller, which will basically only return the teams that belong to you as a user. After creating this controller, we went to the front end and made sure that instead of calling, I'm gonna go here. Instead of calling the regular URL for the generic control that we had, we're calling this custom controller that had that custom logic of like, hey, only return the members of the team that you have permission for. And that was basically what we did, because beforehand, and I could show you this super easily. So this is the local, this is the new changes that are running locally, where you're now only able to see the teams that belong to you. But if you go back to the previous state, and this is living here, community1project.com. Here, let me log out. Notice how here we got all the teams. And this is kind of a good example. Like, a bunch of you guys created user accounts, and a bunch of you guys just added all the different teams. But the issue is that the old implementation wasn't checking, is the team owner associated with this particular team? So right now, I could log in as whoever I want, and I could delete your teams. Like, look, Sharon made a team. If I wanted to be a jerk, I could delete it, but I'm not going to delete it. I'm just going to edit it. But I shouldn't be able to edit Sharon's team. And these are the changes that we made. So what I'm going to do right now is quickly push the changes that we made. And then we should see that when you log in again, you should only be able to see your own teams and your own users. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to do something really bad and terrible. No, I'm not going to do something terrible. So whenever you make changes, guys, here's very important. So we made 2 changes. Don't push it into a master branch, right? Instead, create a new branch and then call it front end, whatever you did, like you want to call it, front end get my teams only, right? Create a new branch. And then save all the changes that you just made to a separate branch. Don't ever push into master, right? It's a very easy way to break stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say front end get all my teams only. And I'm going to push this to my repo. Great. And I'm going to do the same thing on the back end. I'm going to create a new branch. Can't custom controller. And I'm going to save all these changes here. And the reason why you want to do this is because if something, like, you want to check your code before you push it into a master. So I'm going to kill this server, get status, get add, get status again. We're going to add, we modify 2 places. We create a new controller, and then we created new routes. So I'm going to get commit message custom controller. I could write a better message, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to do. And I'm going to push it to my GitHub. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and into my GitHub. I'm going to go to my GitHub. And I'm going to look, I don't know why I called it Strapi for front end. But notice we have a pull request. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the pull requests. I'm going to check my work. I'm going to first create a pull request. And you could add reviewers if you're working in a team, labels and notes or project. Because I'm working by myself, I'm not being that crazy. And first of all, Netlify will do basic tests to see if there's any stupid errors that I have, like unused variables or whatever, and it will show the errors here. While it's doing this, I could go to files changed, and I could see the changes I made. Okay, cool. Like, I see that I changed the original response to point to the new controller that we made. That's the change that we want. Okay, it's the same change I did here. Okay, so this looks good. And, you know, I could be like, oh, I viewed this. And again, when you're working on a team, you could write messages, whatever. So I basically reviewed the changes, my files, and I'm just going to wait for the GitHub check to pass. And it passed. So I checked my changes that I wanted to push. And so now I'm going to do squash and merge. I'm going to squash and merge, confirm squash and merge. And this basically will deploy the changes to the deployed front end on Netlify. So let that work right now. I'm going to go to back to myself here. Nope. I don't like that view. Where's that? Okay, and then the hell did I call it? Digital Strapi, because it's this particular project is deploying digital. So notice how we have our backend pull request we're going to create. Compare and make a pull request. So for this is our backend controller customization. And notice how I create a pull request. Before I merge anything into masters, I like to check my code. This should be a good habit. And obviously when you're working on a team, you're going to have other reviewers. You might have different labels that you want to use, projects that you manage, blah, 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 blah. But for now, I'm just myself only. I'm just adding this extra step. Hey, check. Files changed. So what changed? Okay, we added get my team's controller. So that's good. And then we added the new route for our for our new route for our custom controller. So that's good. And so I'm happy with those changes. So now I'm going to squash and merge and confirm. And I'm going to push those changes to my backend. So now this is going to trigger a rebuild on DigitalOcean to rebuild my backend. And it'll also do the same thing on the front end. And before I get too carried away, what I'm going to do is in my local branch, I'm going to change back to masters, do get fetch all, and prune anything that's unused. And then I'm going to pull those changes that I just merged from origin master from GitHub to my local branch. I think for backend, like using DigitalOcean or Heroku, because I think like Netlify is for front end, so there's no way. Like I haven't done it, to be honest with you. I don't think you can either. I think it's mostly for front ends, for static generated sites, like React, basic HTML site. Maybe you could deploy Gatsby site on it, but I don't think you can't even deploy Strapi on Netlify. I think you need to use either Heroku, a Docker image, or DigitalOcean, what have you. So let me go back here, and this was answering Engine Boy's question here. And so what I'm going to do here, go back to my backend code, make sure I check out master, get fetch. I like calling get fetch all and then prune all the time, just in case it doesn't do it automatically by VS Code. And then I'm gonna get pull to pull all the changes from origin master and blah blah blah. So now my master branch reflects all the new changes that we did from my PR request. And then now let's take a look at the deployed application and see if that's true. So notice how before we're getting everybody, right? Doesn't matter who created what. You could log in as any users and you're getting all the teams. And as any user, you could delete somebody else's team. So the changes that we implemented today basically changed that, because now you should only see your own teams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out. So remember all the different teams that we have here. I'm going to log out, and let me just check on Netlify that all the new changes deployed. So community one project, front end get my teams only. So that seems, yeah, published at 10:40. So that deploy was successful. So that's good. Now I don't remember which DigitalOcean.com, which account I have it here. Log in. I think I log in with GitHub for this particular account. Sign in with GitHub. Come on, computer. Let's see if the changes that we added today were published. And this is why I like using DigitalOcean. And somebody was saying that Heroku no longer allows you to update stuff from GitHub. I don't know. I'm going to have to check that out, because that's a bummer if that you can't auto deploy from GitHub, but we'll see. So this is where I'm running my Strapi application. And notice how everything is live. So all the changes that we made today, we were able to deploy live. So this is my team's project backend. So it's currently deploying. So to test it, I guess I could wait. I don't know if I'll wait a little bit. If it's going to take a little bit longer to deploy, we could test it in a different stream. But yeah, and so my backend is deployed via DigitalOcean. My front end is deployed by Netlify. And so I'm going to wait a little bit for this to kind of finish, so we could actually test to see if the changes that we implement today work. For at least, we'll wait like 5 minutes. If not, we'll see what happens. So my build failed. So go to build logs. So P is not defined. So I must have fat fingered something. I do that a lot. So so where was this? Routes, custom routes, custom routes. Oh, look at that. Now I'm gonna do a cardinal sin. Even for something little like this, I probably shouldn't deploy to master, but I'm gonna deploy it to master, which is terrible. Don't ever do it. Just because I'm not gonna make a PR for that, but you would never do that. You would always make a PR, regardless what the minor change you did. So it's gonna push directly to master, which we should never do. Look at that, bad examples. But this should retrigger the build. I know, big B420, like 100%. I almost gave myself a heart attack because you should never do that. That's like the worst thing I could have done. And someone could clip that and it'll be the end of my career for sure. And so in theory now, running inside my team's project inside activity. So it's rebuilding the application again. We're going to see if it has any issues. But again, like I said, I'm going to wait a few minutes. And this is the crazy thing. Like I was going to say, like we'll wait a few minutes so we could test the deploy to see what happens. And this is something that I want to talk about. Like whenever people say like, hey, I'm a full stack developer, it's all good, right? Nothing wrong with that. But to become a full stack developer, there's a lot of stuff you have to learn. Not only the fact that, hey, I created this application with Node or Python, but big part of you guys working as backend engineers is this idea of making sure you're able to deploy the application. You know how to set up, automatic testing, doing continuous integration and deployment with automatic tests. You need to know all that stuff. You need to know how to make sure you could catch errors in a deployed application using something like Sentry, because you're not going to see errors in console logs, once your app's deployed, right? You need to have a way to log errors. So there's so much stuff that goes into it. So what I suggest to a lot of people, you can do whatever you like, but I suggest to people start with front end, and there's no shame. Like I'm literally learning how to become a backend developer by using Strapi and learning how to customize it to add additional functionality to be able to kind of see how others create their backends. And I use that as an example to learn myself, and it allows me to start a full stack application without being a full stack developer. But over time, I'm learning all the little things that I need to transition into backend. So when you're starting out, I would say focus more on the front end. Learn to use something like Strapi.js or Contentful, or there's a bunch of other CMSs or Firebase that you could use to create a backend easily, to be able to power your awesome front end application. And Engine Boy says, do you have some pipeline set up for doing auto deploys in DigitalOcean? At the moment right now, what it does is exactly what I just showed you. I make a change, and whatever changes I push to master, it will do auto deploy. The issue there, if it fails, it will revert back to the last working branch. So the next goal at some point, it's probably going to be like a couple of months from now, because we still have a bunch of things that I want to do first. But I want to do some basic testing for the back end and the front end. And I want to look into Circle CI for automatic deployment and checks, which we'll get there when we get there. But for now, this is where we at. And so, yeah, the application is still building. We'll see if it succeeds or not. It looks like it's going to succeed. It's still doing its thing. So if you guys have questions, this is the time to ask while we wait. And by the way, thank you for joining these streams. I know these streams, like a lot of times, are not as exciting. They're boring. Sometimes it's a lot of me banging my head against the table. But the truth is, I just want to do at least one live stream of coding where I show you the reality of coding, where it's not like I know how to do this, so let me show it to you because I prepared. But instead, it's like I kind of think I know how to do this. Let me struggle through it so you guys could see what the reality of coding is when you're coding on your own, because I don't want you to guys feel discouraged like, oh, I don't know how to do this, so let me do like 20 more tutorials. No, after 3, 4, 5 tutorials at most, stop doing tutorials and start coding on your own. Start doing your own work. It's okay to fail. It's okay to struggle. Like, look at me, I'm failing publicly every time. And so you got to make sure that don't worry about failure. The faster you fail, the faster you learn. That's the general idea. Yeah, and definitely every time I push changes, it does add those little awesome squares to GitHub that make me look like I'm constantly coding and building stuff. Because at least on Tuesday, I'm constantly building and coding stuff. So I believe our backend was deployed via DigitalOcean. So we're going to look at here. So nice. Our site is live. So before everything works, one thing that you have to remember with Strapi, that because we added a new, I don't remember what's my login. God damn it. Is it Paul Braslavsky? Whenever you create custom controllers, you do have to give permission from the admin. I'll show you what I mean. So we created we go to roles, we go to authenticated, we go to teams, and notice how the custom control that we created is out of the box disabled. And this is what Strapi does by design for security, that any additional API endpoint that you create, it's not going to give access to anybody until you manually authorize it. So I'm going to authorize it, click save, and now that should work. And now we could go to our original application. So this is the live deployed application. Before, when I logged in as, actually, let me check what users we have here. I know a bunch of you guys created user accounts. Oh, you guys use the test user account. By the way, guys, you could go here. Let me share the front end. Go create your own users, break it, test it out for me. So I'll put it in the chat. So now, instead of using a test user, you could actually go sign up to the application, create your own user. So control copy. I bet like when I log in as test user, I'm gonna see all the accounts created as test user. Yeah, so the reason why everybody sees all these accounts, because they were created by the test user account. So what I'm going to do, actually, just to kind of check it, I'm going to go to the backend manually. I'm going to go to Content Manager. I'm going to check users. Now we have some other users here. Fantastic. I'm going to go here. Teams. Hold on a second. Wait a second. We might have another issue that I didn't anticipate. Okay, so now it's working. I just had to refresh it from the last time. So let me see here. Let me check stuff out here. Let me go to the back end here. Let me go teams. Teams. Huh. I'm kind of curious. Let me delete all the teams here. I might have some. Oh, okay. It's fine. It's fine. Let me delete all the teams first. Let me delete all, and the users. You guys know who you are. It's fine. Let me just test it here. Community 1 project. Let me log in as test user at email first. No, I think that team is still there. So this is test user, which everybody could log in as test user. But let me log out. Now what you could do is you could create your own user. Coding 30. Coding after 30 Gmail. I might have already created this account. I don't know. Okay, so yeah, so now I don't see the previous team that was added as test user. So I'm going to create a team. This team belongs to coding after 30. Hey, so submit. So I created a team that belongs to coding after 30. If I log out and I log in as test user, that test user should not be able to see my team. Yeah, and so somebody just created a new team for a test user. Fantastic. So now, look, everybody who has their own account, you're only able to see the teams that belong to you. So this is awesome. Before, you could be any user and you saw all the teams. So at least now, you only have access to the teams that you created. So if I log out and go to coding after 30 at gmail.com, my super secret password. So we're making progress. Except my team disappeared. And this is an issue. This is a totally different issue. WT, yeah, hello. Do I have 2 coding after 30 users? And this is like super exciting to me because I love the fact when you think things work, something breaks. I might have like 2 users with coding after 30. We'll double check here. Let me go here. Users. Oh yeah, so coding after 30, coding after 30. So here's an issue that I shouldn't be able to have unless I misspelled it, but I should not be able to create. I must have misspelled coding. I'm sure I misspelled. Let me delete this guy. Let me create a new user. But either that or I have to, I'm sure I probably misspelled something, but it should not let me create a duplicate user. But luckily, everything works, and we hit a totally different error, which is fine. And thanks, Paul. Awesome. And yeah, WTF means why this fun? Why that's fun? That's what that means. WTF is the name of my team that I added. And I think the reason why the other team was missing because I had different coding after 30 where I had slightly different email. So let me log out. Let me try again. I think everything is fine. Everything is fine. It's going to be okay. Oh, wrong password. Wrong password. Let me try this again. Let me try this again for sanity's sake. Actually, what I'm going to do, because I just realized the changes that... Actually, this should be fine. This should be fine, actually. So let me just go back again. Log out. Let me create new user. I'm going to call coding. Just got to make sure I don't 30 at gmail.com. My super secret password. Can't spell. I think it's getting late, so like I'm mistyping stuff. So not sign in. I have to create a user. What I'm doing, sign up. Sign up coding after 30. Coding 30. But you guys could test it. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to. Oh, that should be email. Password. Register. Okay, I'm able to register. Hey, good morning. Yeah, I'm kind of like, it's good night here, so I'm about to like pass out and go to sleep, but great to see you here. You can tell by my hair and the state of my brain. So create a new team. Coding after 30 crew. Hey, submit. Okay, so let's try this again. Let's log out. Now, if I log in as test user, I should not see Coding After 30 team because Coding After 30 team was not created by the test user and it doesn't belong to test user. So nice, team Unicycle. I see you guys are testing the API. Fantastic. I love it. But create your own user because right now, test user, anybody could delete it. So you could create your own users now. That's perfectly fine. So notice you don't see Coding After 30 team. That's fantastic. So I'm going to log out. I'm going to log in as Coding After 30. And bam. Coding After 30 crews. Okay, we did it. Everything works. So basically what we did today, we created a custom controller that allowed us to create a custom control that allows to only get the teams that belong to a particular user. So there's no way you could get teams that don't belong to you, which is good because nobody should be able to log into the application and see content that they don't have access to or creating themselves. So with that being said, what we're going to do let's just quickly look at our mirror board. To kind of see where we at, see what we have left for this particular sprint before we move on. So let me change my screen. And I'm like passing out, but I want to finish. And by the way, thank all of you guys for joining me. I know like watching other people code is like the most boring thing. So I wish you guys like also ask questions. But at the same time, I do it to encourage you guys to be able to understand this idea. There's nobody who codes perfectly. There's always work. There's always struggle. And so instead, nice, Sharon. And instead, you guys don't be afraid to fail. Because look, every time I fail, I'm failing forward. You know what I'm saying? That's why I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of people making fun of me. I'm not afraid of people saying like whatever. Paul, you don't use glass sitting in front of display. What do you mean by that? But anyway, like I don't mind failing because I fail forwards. It's a great way to learn. So we completed only show your teams. That's fantastic. So the last thing we have to add is send email. So whenever signs up, I want to be able to receive an email. We will handle that later. But I think in the next stream, what I want to do is I want to, for our create, delete, and update, I do want to add an additional check, which will check if the person has authority to delete a post. So right now it's like you're not going to be able to delete somebody else's post because you're not getting anybody else's data, right? But I still want to create a check on the back end which still checks, are you the authorized user for a particular post? Maybe someone will try to use Postman to try different requests that don't make sense. So what I want to do next stream, we're going to make a policy called, we're going to call it is owner, which is team owner, which will be able to pass to all of our controllers to test if that particular request you're authorized to make because you try to make changes to the team that you own. Oh, Engine Boy, if I wear glasses because I stare at the screen too much. First of all, number one is I do need to get glasses. I actually had glasses and I fell down mountain and I lost them. And so I never went to the doctor to get new ones because I'm lazy, but I am going to get new ones soon. And I should get some light blocking glasses for sure. But this is what we're going to do next. Next, we're going to do the policy to get the team owner, and then we're going to finish send email. And for the most part, this initial sprint will be done. And then we could figure out where to go to next, which I think I'm going to take a break from working in this particular application, because what I want to show you is the cool thing about Strapi is that you could have one API that could power multiple applications. So what I want to do is I want to make a complementary app for mobile using Ionic. So right now we have this awesome, kind of dashboard that's going to have a lot of different functionality, but I want to do something where you could use your phone to kind of see the teams that you have and see the tasks that you have for each team or projects. So I want to set up that initial boilerplate for an iOS or Android app. And one cool way to do that is by using Ionic framework. I don't know if you guys heard about it, which allows you to create a Ionic framework, which is a UI library for cross-platform mobile devices, which is pretty amazing. And so, Ionic framework, docs, UI components. So it basically creates amazing UI components. And depending if you're using an Apple, iOS, or Android phone, the UI changes. And what you could do is they have this thing called capacitor, which allows you to create this wrapper around your mobile application. And what's awesome is that you do it with React, right? And TypeScript or JavaScript, whatever. And you're able to create a mobile application. Obviously, it's not as cool as natively creating one, but it's good enough. And so as a JavaScript developer, you could also make mobile applications for either Android or React, and you could have access to the actual components in your phone, like the memory, the camera, and stuff like that. So I think I want to make a complementary app where I hook up, in a simple way, an Ionic application to complement our dashboard application. So our dashboard application would be something you would use from your desktop, and then we're going to have a complementary app via your iPhone where you could get a glimpse of what projects you're working on and who's done what. And so it'll be like a quick at a glance complementary app. And I just want to do it because I want to explore Ionic, and I want to see how feasible it is for making mobile applications. But I did hear a lot of cool stuff about it. And for me, the even cooler part is the fact that I want my API that we're working on here with Strapi to power all the various apps that I have. So instead of having multiple APIs, I just want to have one. And so I want to have my Strapi app power our desktop application, our web app that is made for desktop application. I want to have a complementary iOS app that you could get on App Store. And I want to also have either Next.js blog or a Gatsby blog that will use the same API and will be able to send data to that particular. So I want to have basically one API that powers a bunch of different resources. I think it's awesome because that way you have a home from which you could power different applications, like our project manager that we're doing here, a blog or what have you. So that's the idea. And at least that's the idea. And we'll go from there. So with that being said, guys, I just want to say thank you so much. We did a 2-hour stream. Good Lord. And I want to thank you for giving your time. I know these streams sometimes are tough to watch because who wants to watch somebody else code? And so I hope you guys getting value out of it. And it's giving me an opportunity to live code, run into issues, try to figure them out, and work through them live on stream, because I feel it's the best practice when you're working under pressure to learn. And honestly, I love failing. I love when stuff breaks. I love when I suffer, because to me, every stumble along the way, you're constantly picking yourself up, and you're kind of doing it in public where you're forced to be like, hey, I messed up. This is what I have to fix. This is what I have to do. And you keep moving forward. And before you know it, certain things that used to be hard are going to be easier and easier. So before I go, I want to encourage all of you guys either to write a little blog post where you're describing something new you learned, and it could be literally one paragraph, or make a practice video just for fun. You don't have to show it to anybody, where you're going over the code that you wrote, because let me tell you, it has helped me so much to continue to learn and progress, and I know that it's going to help you too. So with that being said, thank you so much. Love all of you guys, and we do these learn to code live, fail live streams all the time. So you're welcome to join them. And Northern Chimp says, who? I don't know who. I don't remember what I said. I'm so tired. I don't remember what I said 5 minutes ago. And, you know, just keep building stuff. That's all I'm going to say. I'm tired. I'm like passing out. I got to wake up early tomorrow, like every day, which is fine. But I love these streams with you guys. I don't care who shows up because I'm going to do these regardless. But the people that do show up, you do make me feel good because I feel like you guys are appreciating some of the stuff that I'm doing, and I'm hoping that you're finding some value in it. And with that being said, I stream Tuesday and Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Tuesday is me live coding and struggling, failing, and then Saturdays, sometimes I have a guest, but it's all about getting hired, breaking into the field, working on your resume, the soft skills requires. And as my schedule frees up, I'm going to continue to add in between videos, which will talk about basically taking one thing that we did out of a live stream and explaining that concept in more of a tutorial friendly video, like how to set up Strapi, how to create, get, put, delete, update calls using Postman or Insomnia, and what are their in code like equivalents, stuff like that. Something that is short, 5 minutes, and you get the lesson. And yeah, anyway, that's all I want to say. Love you all. Thank you so much. Have a great night, and I'll see you guys. Yeah, next live stream. Oh, next live stream. Yeah, it's going to be on Saturday, and I don't think I have a guest yet. So I think in the next live stream, I really want to talk about this concept, learn in public or build in public, and what that means, and basically what I'm doing on this stream, where I'm basically doing stuff in public and why it's important. And I want to share with you, like I didn't come up with that concept, so many other people do it, but I want to share with you guys why it's important. Yes, Saturdays and Tuesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Tuesdays and Saturdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Yeah, that's the time of the streams. And so with that being said, thank you so much. I had lots of fun as always. And I will see you guys next time. With that being said, good morning, good night, good evening, wherever you are. I hope you have the best rest of the week. And remember, it's okay to do tutorials, but it's even better to start building things from scratch. Fail, it's okay. Look, I fail on stream all the time. I'm still okay. I'm still here, right? Nobody shows up and yells at you. It's okay. And so I want to encourage you guys to build things yourself and struggle along the way by not relying on tutorials, but relying on your own problem solving by struggling, failing, looking at documentation, reading stuff, looking at the examples, and working through it yourself. It's the most important thing that you could do as a developer, because it's going to teach you the most important part, which is solving problems when you run into them. So with that being said, thank you so much. See you guys later. Have a good night. I think we're going to do a dramatic exit like this. That's pretty dramatic. I should just sleep right here on this. Oh, that makes me look scary. That's scary. That is a scary looking. Imagine someone shows up and this is all they see. Like someone shows up right now, this is what they see. This stream's called live coding. That would be hilarious. Anyway, thank you so much. See you guys later. Take care. Bye. Good night.